Hey, everyone. Thanks for checking out the Private Lenders Podcast. Chris and Jason here. As always, sponsored by our mastermind group for private and hard money lenders, hardmoneymastermind.com. Go check it out anytime. Create a free account. See what's there. Today, we're talking about a day in the life of a hard money lender. We're going to talk about at startup time, which was many years ago for us, 13, 14 years, and then current day, right? Like with the current team and everything else and the operation that we have in place. And yeah, hopefully you can learn something or relate to your own operation as a private lender and maybe learn from ours as well.
Yeah. I mean, I always feel like it's helpful when I hear stories about other people's businesses, even if it's not a business that I'm interested in or I'm even in, but I like to hear people's morning routines. I always like to hear about what they did kind of at startup time, what their day looks like. It's so intriguing to hear what other people's days look like, and you kind of compare them. And most people's are very similar to yours, ours, I would guess, one way or the other, but it's interesting. So why don't we start with what maybe the average day looked like for us when we started, early on, maybe between 2007 and 2010, pre-employees, pre-big portfolio, being well capitalized and having constant deal flow, like some of the things that we worked on. And for the most part, I feel like we always did a good job of separating tasks, right? Related to deal origination. Most of the stuff I worked on was deal origination and deal underwriting. And most of the stuff you worked on was more capital raising and accounting, stuff like that. Mm-hmm. Although there was obviously overlap. We didn't know that was the direction we were each going in. What are a few things maybe that you remember doing?
Yeah, it's different. It's going to be funny. It's going to be funny.
And then we'll wrap, and then that'll be the first part of the show. The second part of the show, we'll talk about, what our current operation is, our day in the life that way.
Okay. All right. So back then, 2007, 2008, we were in the back of a title company that we paid $500 a month to be there. They had a bunch of space they didn't needed. There's a bunch of there's a ton of space. Remember all those cubicles and everything else and like old copiers and stuff? It was funny. So I remember that we each lived maybe 45 minutes away from this office, right? In two different directions. And it was kind of centrally located. And we had a lot to do back then because we had to do all the admin stuff. We didn't have any help or anything. So we tried to get in there early. And I remembered that we would shoot for 7 a.m. oftentimes. And our reward for getting there by 7 a.m. was Jason would pick up McDonald's breakfast. So these are just many things that we don't do anymore in any way. But that was the treat. That was the reward to get your ass there by 7 a.m. We'd get in there and we had, like, for example, just so many things were different back then. I was doing all the accounting myself. I would cut checks for everything. We weren't automated. We weren't ACH. We didn't have proper servicing system. I'm looking at spreadsheets and cutting checks from QuickBooks and mailing everything myself. I'm mailing every check. I'm licking all the stuff. We didn't even scan and email documents to our investors after closing. I was mailing them out with the checks. So I'm making copies and stuff. Like, again, just funny stuff that doesn't really exist in our operation anymore. But that was going on at the time. There would be the in-office kind of stuff to do. It was very admin type work. We were meeting with investors frequently because we were raising money. So there's a lot of lunches, dinners, there's happy hours, stuff like that, in-office meetings, raising capital. We were on the road more for sure. I know Jason was on the road typically pre-closing, like during the underwriting phase, and I was doing draw inspections back then. So I'd be driving around DC, Baltimore area with the check. I go inspect a property, give the borrower the check. And it was also a little FaceTime with them as well,
we definitely did a good bit of happy hours, come to think about it, because we were in an area that had a decent amount of spots. Like we used to do lunches and we used to do happy hours, either with other people or with ourselves. Yep. I remember that, like, a lot more than we ever would do now. Like now we don't really ever go out to lunch.
We're in our 20s and we didn't have kids yet.
Why not go to happy hour, right? All of this was pre-kids. You're right. So that's a good thing to think through. So I think most of my stuff was divided into three different, maybe not roles, but three different activities. And I would say, like, our phone really rang off the hook early on. I remember we had that busted Vonage account. It was like the first VoIP phone ever, pre-Ring Central and this other stuff. And it was in I think we had one phone line that was pretty much in my office, and then it would just ring off the hook all the time. And I would pick up, "Thanks for calling Hard Money Bankers. This is Jason. Can I help you?" And I would have a notepad. I would just write down stuff. And I was learning there. Right now, I can talk to somebody on the phone, like, no matter where I am, very, very easy, barely paying attention, and still determine if it's a deal that potentially works or not, just from reps and experience. I think, what do you recall the reason that our phone did ring off the hook so often? I mean, we ran Google ads right at the beginning. So we had Google ads, and Google ads were cheaper than they were now, right? So we were probably only spending $500 a month. We didn't have a budget like, 5 figures of marketing like we have now. So we did that. We created that email campaign.
Yep.
We were always working and networking with realtors and mortgage brokers, and not to say that these were always quality leads that were coming in, but they were leads, and there was definitely a necessity for capital because there wasn't a lot of capital in the space. The easy part was finding investors that needed, or real estate investors that needed capital. The hard part was for us to raise capital
at that time in the market.
At that time.
Well, I mean, part of the question was when all these people are calling our office, they're like, "Hey, are you guys lending? Like, do you have money to lend?" Like, that's it. That's not a question now. Everybody's got money to lend. Everybody's got capital from all kinds of different sources. Even if they don't raise it themselves, they can get it from, one of the institutional sources. And people would be like, "Okay, are you going to run out? If we start doing business with you, will you run out of money?" Again, that's not a question anymore. And they knew some of the lenders from around town who had crashed in the crash, who were probably getting too aggressive, doing some risky loans, all that, or maybe using some temporary kind of capital, like a credit line or something that wasn't under their control. A lot of those people weren't lending. Like somebody you would have known for 5 years, and it's like, "Oh, we have been borrowing from him for 5 years, and now he's not lending." And so it's just kind of a different time in the market. But yes, we were also early on a lot of the web marketing, just having a proper site, email database, and then social came around after that. And we were kind of the next generation, right? Now the next generation is here. In 2007, like, we were maybe 28, and all of our competitors were 55, right? And now we're in our 40s, and like a lot of the market is kind of like our generation. But at the time, we were the next generation. It was weird, right? Like, it was kind of a unique way to start.
There's a lot of older private capital out there still in this space, but like, there's just so much capital, and there's so, like, I remember back in the day that our goal was like, it wasn't even what our goal was. It was like, how many deals do you think even exist in the marketplace? I remember always having that conversation, and it was like, do you think that there's 20 deals a month that are even had, or 50 deals a month? Like, it was much lower than what's realistic of actually how many, not just deals that we did, like just flippers doing stuff. And I think one of the things personally that getting in at 7 a.m. did was, and again, like, this is, we didn't have loan app, we needed to make loan applications. There's a lot of things we had to do. We didn't know, like, we learned on the fly for this. So I think I did a lot of like lending intents and LOIs and estimated use of funds and term sheets and stuff like that early on, because I remember, like, as soon as it hit 9 or 9:30, the phones would just start blowing up. I didn't have time for anything else. So from what I recall, I'm not 100% sure about this. From what I recall, I would do a lot of the paperwork and the stuff like that early on, man emails, do loan applications, things like that. And then start at 9 o'clock. It was just like deal, talking to people. And then at, I don't know, maybe 11 o'clock or whatever, it would get in my car and start, going to look at the real deals, the real properties. Right now, it's very, very different than what it was before, but I didn't know, we didn't know the areas that well. We didn't know a lot of the people that well. So we had to go look at all those properties. Like, I didn't know how to eyeball construction. I didn't know what was realistic, what wasn't realistic. I didn't know the streets, didn't know the neighborhoods, didn't know communities. So get in the car, try to have at least 4 or 5. We would never drive anywhere just for like one property. It would usually be like 4 or 5 at a time. Right. It'd be like, these are the deals that we're working on. Let's go take a look at all of them. And, going to DC, it was 45 minutes. Like, it was a pain in the neck. And like, I remember
it was half a day. It was half a day.
And we'd always be back we try to be back by 3 o'clock, because if not, we couldn't get around the Beltway.
And here's another thing we did. Now that we're talking about it, we would both go on a lot of these like during underwriting inspections, and we'd shoot a video too. It was back before iPhones and easy videos and all this. And I had a Canon camera. We had a couple different ones, but it was like a camera, like a regular camera you had to shoot a video with. And I would take a video around the house for a couple reasons. One, because we're inspecting a property as we're underwriting it. And two, because this is part of the presentation I can show to the investors who are going to be investing in this loan, right? So that would be part of the information I relayed to them as part of the deal package. And, here's the asset, here's why all the numbers were, all that kind of stuff. It just kind of went into it. And at the beginning, especially when people were first getting comfortable with putting their money with us, that went a long way, right? It made them feel like they knew the property. They didn't have to drive out there themselves, but they could see it, walk around it, even see the borrower in there, like who we're lending the money to. And so that was another thing that came to mind that, again, we did it back then. We don't do any of that now.
Yeah. So let's just recap real quick what we did then, and then we'll talk about what we do now. So an average day was, marketing, doing what we could to market, doing email blasts, related to that, fielding calls, talking to as many people as we can, not just borrowers, but also referral partners, do whatever we could, underwriting loans, going to look at properties. I certainly encourage every single person for at least a year or two to be on the road looking at properties if you want to be a full-time real estate hard money lender. And then what else would you recommend on a daily basis for capital raising?
So on that side, you're just going to have a bunch of stuff to do depending on what your setup is. And if you don't have any staff, like you're going to be cutting all the checks, right? You're going to be, investor relations is always there. It never goes away. You're constantly communicating with your investors about deals, and just answering simple questions. It's a lot easier now than it was back then, but that's always going to be part of it. Just doing the things that you have to do office and accounting wise and getting back to people, and then, creating the new opportunities, right? Like you have to, whatever your marketing checklist is, and that's going to be more today than it was back then that I'm going to talk about in that segment. But yeah, you're going to have a lot of proactive sales type of work, looking at your spreadsheet of potential investors, reaching out to people, setting lunches, sending them new deals to look at, getting on the phone to explain them. Also, I had a list for the investors, and I would send out our closed deals so that people who are not yet in the game with us could see that people were funding our deals, earning double-digit rate of return, and kind of keep them on the line, right? Kind of keep dripping on them, whet the appetite to invest with us. So there's always that stuff every day too. That was my proactive growth, got to grow this company sort of portion of the day.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And then, so let's fast forward to, where we are now. And this could be the last 7 years, maybe. I don't exactly know timelines, but we have employees between loan processors and bookkeepers and accountants and property inspectors and at one time or the other, loan originators and things like that. So I would say that the majority, I like to break up my personal day as active stuff and proactive stuff and reactive stuff. So it's usually like 50-50. And when I talk about proactive stuff, it's marketing. It's stuff that, entrepreneurs and self-starters and, someone like yourself listening or watching this should be doing proactive stuff to try to mostly generate business. Now, obviously there's management of employees and there's things like that, but usually about half the day I'm trying to either proactively, grow the business. Let's say that either working with some of our partners in other markets, or working with some of our employees, or potentially reaching out strategically to some of our borrowers to get creative on other business ventures and things like that, or just marketing stuff. Typically we'll do at least one marketing video every day. Like currently we're in the process of creating a better podcast studio to try to encourage local real estate investors and guests to come in and do live videos instead of video interview. Those typically get more, those end up being a little bit better. So marketing related stuff. And, sometimes it's busier than others. Like sometimes it could be like, hey, we need to rework our website or this marketing funnel, or, I don't know, put this new marketing campaign together. Right. And that could take like a week of let's just spend time on that. Other days, it could be as simple as like, hey, got to do a video interview. That's going to take an hour. And then we got to cut it up in videos, send it to our outsourced guys and publish it. Things like that. So That's some of my proactive stuff. And again, days are different, but 50% of the day is typically that. And then 50% which we'll go through in a second, is more reactive stuff.
Yeah. Okay. So what do my days look? And some of this has changed recently too, like pandemic and moving houses and like things that have shifted a little bit. And what my days look like currently, totally enjoyable and productive. So I will get up in the morning, and one thing, all the productivity people and the entrepreneur experts of this stuff, they say to dive into your morning routine right away. Like, don't get trapped by your email and stuff. I'm guilty of that. I get up in the morning, I want to have some tea, get some caffeine, wake up a little bit, and I go into the office and I'm looking at my email to see if there's anything urgent or what's going on. It's kind of just like keeping an eye on things, right? Until I wake up, get some caffeine in me, go down to the basement for a workout, get showered, get ready, and try to be in the office around noon. That's the current situation. At the office, the things that are going to happen every day, I have my marketing checklist for the week. So there's things I'm going to have to do, like doing podcast videos, email broadcasts, checking on paid traffic campaigns, stuff like that. So there's always part of that going on. I always have some kind of portfolio management happening, mainly related to defaults, working with the lawyers in the different jurisdictions and what's going on with that, or negotiating an exit with a borrower. There's always some kind of default management happening. There's always some investor relations. Somebody will have some questions about something, reach out to me to deploy some capital for them, stuff like that. And then there's my straight transactional work of putting money into deals, right? So I don't have to proactively raise capital too much these days. It's kind of growing organically and has been for quite a while. But I need to keep an eye on the cash, keep an eye on the loans that we have closing, and put the money into the deals that I want, right? So I have a little bit of, keystrokes to make that happen and to relay that information over to our controller to go into the service system. And so that's just kind of like a transactional work that's always happening, right? That's pretty much my story currently.
Yeah, exactly. So then I have, we talked about the proactive stuff. Then we have the reactive stuff. I'm a little guilty of looking at emails in the morning as well, mostly just to get a sense of like what's going on. If there's anything big, like, I'm waiting on a law firm to respond to us currently related to this title exception that we're working on for a big loan. And, I sent them an email last night, and I'm patiently waiting for them to respond because I have, additional items I need to deal with after that comes in, right? So like I'm looking out for that. But typically there's nothing too urgent or time sensitive, but I can sometimes plan part of my reactive part of my day based on where those emails are, right? Like, hey, someone could be like, hey, yeah, let's move forward on this deal, right? Maybe I gave a term sheet to somebody on a few days ago and I'm waiting to hear back. So things like that. So I'll jump on email if I need to for a short period of time at the beginning of the day, before I get into the office if needed, and just for kind of stuff that is urgent. So reactive stuff is, working with potential clients, taking leads over the phone, underwriting loans, working with our processing team to make sure the deals that we're working on work, things like that. Nothing too crazy. We internally, so our local office, we try to get like one metrics we look at is we try to get one term sheet out every day, because one term sheet out every day, one to two term sheets out every day for the most part ends up closing about 4 deals a week, right? Locally. And that's kind of where we want to be in. It doesn't include our other business partners. They have their own metrics, but for the most part, when I send out a term sheet, 2 out of 3 term sheets end up closing. Right.
Okay. Good to know.
A lot of people have different ways that they run stuff. Some lenders like to just send out term sheets to everybody as quick as possible and just have them out there. I'm not sending out a term sheet to anybody unless they verbally agreed to everything and they're ready to go and they have a property under contract. Right. So I'm not, it takes me time to do that. It takes me legitimately 20 minutes of undivided time to send out a term sheet properly, the right way, and have a professional with the email and everything else. So if I'm sending out a term sheet, I want that deal to close. I want to do whatever I can to make it. So like to me, when I'm sending out a term sheet, that's it's kind of like a win. It's like, hey, we have a deal. Mm-hmm. It's pretty much ready to go.
That's like you're closed. That's like you're closing the sale. They agree.
They've agreed. They just haven't, signed or made payments, or made their like due diligence payment to proceed. So that's, you know, if I get my term sheet or 2 term sheets out a day, that's a win, right? Mm-hmm. That could be in an 8-hour work week, 8 work day, or a 20-minute work day, depending on the situation. So like yesterday, a repeat borrower hit me up and was like, hey, what can you do on this deal? 5 minutes later, I got back to him and like, hey, we can do a loan of $150, $20,000 back. You're going to need like 50 grand cash to close. They're like, cool, let's proceed. Great. Did mine for the day. Put a deal in underwriting or in processing for the day, right? Like that's a win.
Yep.
So yeah, totally. I will say over the years, we've been a lot more focused on quality over quantity, right? So it's probably less, it's higher quality leads. It's higher quality leads and a higher closing rate than before. And that's what we all want, right? No one wants to go through 50 loans to close one. You want to go through 5 loans to close one, or 5 leads to close one. Right. So we've spending a lot of time kind of doing that. And I'll tell you that at least I see this. I don't know if this is all over the country, but we see this, that the market's kind of weeded out a lot of the newbies because the industry norm is not 100% financing like it could have been in the past. And sometimes it was in a different market. Everybody knows that they need 20% down or they need a good amount of cash just because the institutional lenders have kind of put that in people's brains. And that's actually very helpful to us.
Yeah.
Not many people are calling me. It's very rare that somebody calls and says, hey, I don't have any money. I need 100% financing. That was very, very common. That was 50% of the calls years back. That's never a call anymore. Usually what happens now is I tell people they're probably going to need at least 20% minus plus closing costs. And a lot of them say, can you do it at 10%? So they're still.
That's what they're hearing. 90% acquisition, 100% of construction, right?
Yeah.
That's the messaging out there.
Or they already have a quote at 20% down, but they only have 10% type of thing. So yeah.
That, I mean, things should evolve over time into the way you want. And it has for us, like we have the right amount of team. We don't want to be too big, but at the same time, we don't want to have to do every keystroke ourselves and take every phone call ourselves like we have in the past. But yeah, I hope that gives you a good look at startup time, how it was running then and now 13, 14 years in, what a day in the life looks like. And yeah, hope you guys liked it. We will see you in the mastermind group. Like I said, chime in anytime, start a conversation, ask a question, create a free account at hardmoneymastermind.com. And we will see you next time on the Private Lenders Podcast.
Take care, guys. Hope to see you soon. If you enjoyed this episode,